My name is Jean-François Dugas. I'm the Senior Creative Director on Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'm really happy to be with you guys here today.
I always like starting out just finding out how the project got started. Getting a licensed game is very different than creating something new, a new IP, right? Can you kind of walk us through the early stages of development and those, first discussions?
Absolutely. Actually, we're talking about a franchise, like you said, that pertains to Marvel and not to Eidos Montreal, and how we deal with that. The cool thing with this project, when it started, we had an initial meeting with Marvel Entertainment to discuss what this collaboration could be. And for us at Eidos Montreal, it's important to be able to have some freedom, creatively speaking. And what was really cool about Marvel is that's exactly why they wanted to work with us, because they wanted us to bring our own flavor and our own creativity to this project and create a fresh take on the Guardians that you haven't seen before. And so the early discussions were about that, and we got immediately excited because when you look at the source material coming from the comics, and then that was also expanded and got mainstream with the movies and everything, we knew that we had something rich and deep in our hands to create something quite unique, quite funky, quite out there, I should say. And so the first discussions were really about having this connection with Marvel and being on the same page to where we're going to go with this title. So that was really, really that.
And, when you think of Guardians of the Galaxy, it's a team, right? So immediately your mind goes, okay, they're making a multiplayer game or they're making a co-op game. Walk us through the decision to make it a single player game. I see a lot of influence from another kind of space opera that might have just come out recently. Can you kind of walk us through that as well?
Yes. Well, we like to break expectations, and I think here it's no different, right? When we started the project, we look at the franchise we had in our hands, and we were like, okay, how do we leverage that? How do we create something unique that speaks to the material we have in our hands? So I would say in our initial brainstorms, we considered many options, like you just mentioned, like multiplayer or playing the many characters and whatnot. And ultimately, we were, those characters are so unique. They have strong personalities. They're eclectic. They're really, really a unique character that can clash with each other, but also connect at the same time. And we were, it'd be awesome to be one of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Like you, the player, you're one of them. You're not playing their adventure. It's your adventure. And you're with those characters like Gamora, Drax, Rocket, and Groot, and they're surrounding you. And we were like, if we put you in the shoes of the so-called leader and having to deal with their quirky personalities, and sometimes they will make decisions by themselves that you will have to react to, or you will make decisions that they might agree or disagree with which is going to lead to consequences. So when we were brainstorming and starting to think about that fantasy, we thought that there was something really, really powerful out there to create something unique. After that, we spent several years trying to figure out to make it work and make it fun. But that was the really nice challenge with that. And Eidos jumped on board. Marvel was excited as well, and we truly believe that we had a unique angle to surprise the players and bring them into the shoes of one of the Guardians and journey with this bunch of misfits.
And how does the game begin then? Like we saw the title screen with them kind of hanging out, doing their stuff, all in their own little zones.
Yep.
Where do we go from that moment? Is it immediately just kind of you're in this story and moving, or what is the kind of the set?
Yeah, it's this game, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, is a third-person action adventure, and it's super narratively driven. and you're in the shoes of Peter. So right away when you start the game, to give you a bit of context, this game starts about a decade after a big galactic war where a lot of things happened, a lot of people suffered, a lot of scars are still like seen and felt in the world. But it's also a world where positivity comes back and where there's a lot of opportunity to do a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, to make some money. And the Guardians and Peter like truly hope like they can make a difference and help in their own quirky way to rebuild a bit that galaxy. And unbeknownst to them, when they go for a mission early on in the game where they heard that a woman, a queen called Lady Hellbender, wanted some kind of monster, they went after it. And in true Guardian fashion, things never go the way they think it will go. And unbeknownst to them, as they go through that journey, they release a very mysterious entity that at this point in time looks like inconsequential. And as they continue their life trying to make a little bit of money, this thing grows in the shadows and eventually threatens the galaxy. And now the Guardians will realize that what they created accidentally on a small scale, they will have to fix it on a massive scale, and they will have to become more than what they are. Because at the beginning, this group is, they call themselves the Guardians of the Galaxy as a marketing ploy. They have their business cards to prove it. So they're really legitimate heroes for hire. But as the game progresses and they discover what they created, they will have to become more than the marketing ploy to really save the galaxy from its own demise.
We kind of, we kind of started off like they were on the ship and kind of deciding if they were going to kind of at first send in Rocket or Groot.
Yes.
Are these sort of, I mean, it seems like, I know we saw when we were throwing Rocket across the drawbridge to activate that, at the top left, we saw, essentially, Rocket's going to remember that he's angry. Yes. How often are those sort of decisions and, little interactions scattered throughout the game? Are they more few and far between, or are they pretty frequent?
There's a fair amount of choices and consequences through the title. Since in this game, like, we want to put you in the shoes of Peter Quill, as known as Star-Lord, and we want you to be the so-called leader and making decisions like that. It implies those kind of events like you're mentioning, in which like there will be a situation, and as the so-called leader, you have to decide what to do, or sometimes adapt to unexpected behaviors from your guardians. So in the cases you're mentioning, they go from, I would say, small scale kind of events, like in this case with Rocket when he's being thrown on the other side of the chasm, or the chasm, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Ultimately, you make that choice. And if you throw him, like you said, he's mad, and maybe later on you will encounter a similar situation in which you will go, no, nobody's going to throw me ever again on the other side. And now suddenly you have to find another way to overcome the obstacle. Or if you didn't throw him in the first place, in what you saw today in the footage, maybe you'll see other opportunities. And down the line, when you see a similar situation, maybe you still have this card up your sleeve to use at that point in time. So, but those are like minute-to-minute kind of gameplay moment. And there are also some other bigger choices that will also have an impact on how the story is being told or being experienced by the players. Like, it's important to say that the overarching story is the same for all the players. All the players will have the same great epic adventure, but how that story is being experienced will be tailored to those choices like you're mentioning, and how you're going to decide to react. So sometimes it will be on a small gameplay level, or in a more like character level, where a character will come back to you like, remember what you did to me, and I'm putting it in your face, or something along those lines. And there will be other moments where it's going to be more on a massive scale, like what's going to happen. So it's going to be a bit of everything throughout the journey. In
the moment you showed with Groot getting into the container, Does that mean, like, in a moment like that he's not available for combat because, you know, he's isolated? Is that kind of the level of choice you're going for, where you might not have a Guardian with you at a certain time?
Absolutely. It's a great point. The decisions you're going to make, or even some of the twists and turns in the story, might make some of a Guardian or mini Guardians not available. And suddenly, like, because even though you play, one thing we didn't talk about, but you play as Star-Lord, but you're constantly interacting with the Guardians. Like, you banter with them as you explore the world, and as you fight, you use your own skills, your weapons, your jet boots, your melee skills, but you also use the abilities of the Guardians to maximize your opportunity against the enemies. And in some ways, it feels like when you play it, it's kind of a single player team play kind of a experience. And for sure, like, as you get used to switch between your own skills and using the skills of the Guardians and everything, and when there's a moment that someone that is taken away for some reason, oh my God, like, now you have like a new spin. I'm missing those kind of abilities that I cannot use now, and I need to play a little bit differently. And those kind of curveballs make it very interesting throughout the adventure.
You're in control of Peter Quill, but you have these commands that you can issue to the various Guardians.
Yes.
I think that we saw how, like, some of them can even link together. Like, we saw Groot hold one of them in place and then Rocket blow them up. Can you give a few examples of, like, how the abilities and the commands that you can give to the Guardians can play off one another?
Absolutely. It's each Guardian's, like, without going in all the super details, each Guardian, they have all their set of abilities. When you look at Groot, is more like the kind of the protector, like he's kind of the one that will have more defense mechanisms and whatnot. Is able also to hold in place some of the enemies. Drax is more kind of like the stagger guy, like that will just unbalance the enemies and shake them off. Gamora is the assassin. She can be really deadly and inflict a lot of damage. And Rocket is the area of effect kind of guy, like affecting many enemies at once and whatnot. And Peter in all of this is a little bit of the jack of all trades with his element guns, his the powers of his guns, his jet boots, melee attacks. He also has his set of abilities. And what you're talking about was actually one of our goals, was to make sure that the gameplay and the combat system was fairly flexible for you as a player to identify the different opportunities, like, oh, this enemy is moving super fast and like it's hard to shoot on, or even like throwing a grenade on it, boom, like you missed the mark. Oh, but I have Groot, and if I manage to hold that character or that enemy in place, and now I can like bounce back, maybe like, is it time to stagger, or is it time to send Gamora for maximum damage, or Rocket, or even your own abilities. And now suddenly the battlefield becomes very interesting, because there's not just one set of ways, like enemy A, there's one way to defeat that enemy. Enemy B, there's one way. No, you can be creative and combine those things. And depending on how you play as well, as you stay with your Guardians, you use them, you're close to them, you make sure that they don't stay in trouble and whatnot, you create opportunities for massive combos where, like, now you can chain like the Guardian abilities with your own abilities to really have a really efficient strike down. So that's the kind of gameplay experience we're going for, like creating those sorts of combos. Groot has an ability where at some point with his vines, like his branches can pop the enemies out of the ground. And when they're in the air, you can decide to use one of Rocket's bomb, like will stagger all the characters together. And now you can send Gamora and like just mishmash, like, and inflict a lot of damage. So when they fall back on the ground, they're either dead or you don't have much left to do and you just finish them, or things like that. So that's the kind of fun experience we're going for. And it feels like you're constantly using the power of your Guardians, and they're constantly with you, and you're maximizing all those opportunities.
Can you walk us through the mechanics a little, like on the controller, just kind of how, like, obviously if you're running and gunning, you kind of have a mindset of you're using the triggers to fire, but how do you do the abilities then? I saw the face buttons, but how do you get to that wheel?
It's very simple. It's do I have a controller here? I have a controller here. We have what we call the Guardians button. You just press it, and then when you hold it, you have your face buttons, and one is associated to Gamora, the other for Drax, the other for Groot and Rocket, and you just press on that. And depending if they have like one ability open, you just go tap, tap, and you do that, or you open their own set of abilities, but it's super quick. It's Guardians, tap, tap, and boom, they're back doing their thing, and you continue to play.
And are they on a cooldown if you do their ability?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So that's what makes also the game interesting, is that you have some abilities that are more efficient than other, depending on who you're facing and whatnot. And starting the specific fight and just spamming your Guardians right away might not be the best way to approach the situation, because you will have enemies that need to be staggered before you can do damage. You have some grunts that will be a little bit more like cannon fodder kind of thing, but you will have enemies like, oh, if you spam and now you have to the cooldowns, like, okay, now I need to manage my time on the battlefield to hope to have those abilities back soon enough, so now I can change my strategy and make sure that I optimize my chances against a given enemy.
And is the cooldown just for each individual ability, those 4 abilities that they have, or do you just have like a certain amount of times you can call in a Guardian within an amount of time? How do you decide that?
It's simple. Like you have your abilities. So if they're not used, like they're ready to be used.
Okay.
Guardians.
You could just go one Guardian after another, spamming all 4. And
you can do whatever you want, but after that, they will all be in the cooldown at the same time. And depending on the ability, like we have the basic abilities and the mega abilities, and those 2 sets are on a different timer. And therefore, a mega ability inflicts more damage or is more efficient, so to speak. Therefore, it's more powerful. So it takes longer, but it's essentially that. Like it's super simple idea.
And then if you're not using the Guardians, what are they doing on the battlefield? Are they just kind of hanging back? Are they doing some damage?
They're fighting, they're doing their thing, and they can manage to kill enemies and everything. And that's an interesting question, because one of the things that is important to us, you play Star-Lord, you're with your 4 Guardians, and how do we keep that synergy or that ecosystem like interesting throughout? If you overpower the Guardians, you're kind of useless. If you overpower Peter, they're kind of useless. And it's to find that balance where by themselves, by default, they feel like real characters. They fight. You don't have to manage them. They don't get cut in a corner going like, you don't go like, what is he or what is she doing there? Like, and that you're trying to force them back into something more logical. You don't have to do that kind of stuff. Like they're fighting, they will be efficient by themselves. They will banter as they fight. So their characterization stays alive in combat as well. So it's not just cutscenes like, oh, characters are alive. No, they're in traversal and puzzles, in combat and everything. And that was a key aspect. We want you to feel that you're surrounded by characters all the time, no matter in what sequence of the game you are in. So to answer back to your question, with that being said, that's exactly that logic. We didn't want them to be a burden. So for Peter, as you play with your own sets of skills, think about the Guardian skills, your superpowers that you use. It's as simple as that. But when you don't use them, they're going to fight. But one thing interesting we did is, if you're the kind of players who pulls back and just like, oh, I'll cross my arms and watch the show or everything, you don't get involved in the combat, they will tend to fall down more quickly. And therefore, like you need to be with your Guardians. You're the so-called leader. You need to be the person that keeps them alive and keeps them like, it's not like if you go away for 2 seconds, they will fall down. That's all I'm saying. Don't get me wrong, but that kind of ecosystem is really important, and we needed to find that balance to really create a unique experience around that.
And one of the worlds we landed on with those kind of platforms looked like a sprawling area, but your path through it was very linear. Can you talk about how you're traversing these environments, how they're designed?
absolutely. Actually, the game like is fairly linear in that sense, where like you have to go from A to B. It's a narrative game. It's a big adventure, but all the locations that you visit, they all have exploration paths and things to discover. Sometimes it's very simple, it's very straightforward. Other places, like you've seen in the footage today, is a little bit more open and everything, but the goal is to really create a big epic adventure that constantly motivates you to move to the next points. But in the exploration setups, like there's a lot of perks that you can unlock for Peter, so you can find component parts to upgrade some of the characters' abilities and everything. And there's also other things like you can find some collectibles and things like that. So there's a mix of exploration throughout something that is fairly driven.
And your ship, is that a hub at some point? Are you kind of hanging out in there and picking where you want to go? Can you go back to different planets, or do you have multiple choices at a time, or are you just doing a very linear story?
We're doing it in a very linear fashion, but being in the Milano, you go to the Milano quite often, and we call it the home of the Guardians. And this is where, like, sometimes a mission just finished, like they fly away, boom, you have a moment in the Milano, you can go and talk with your Guardians, explore in the ship itself, or you can decide, you know what, I'm ready for our next objective, we need to do this, then boom, let's fire up the engines and move to the next part of the adventure.
I was wondering if there was any kind of like character progression, any kind of like skill trees, anything like that for the various characters, whether it's Star-Lord or your squad mates.
Yeah, it's not an action RPG. It's an action adventure. So we didn't go crazy like we didn't want to get in the RPG aspect. That being said, yes, you can unlock abilities for your Guardians, for Peter along the adventure, because as you fight and as you progress through different challenges, you get XP points and you can spend those points on those various abilities. But we keep it fairly simple, fairly accessible, fairly straightforward in that respect. But again, players are free to either take these things or play without them, try to have it all, or just a mix. And in what order you want to unlock these things is really up to players.
And kind of along those same lines, you know, in other recent AAA Marvel games, whether you're talking Spider-Man or Avengers, there's a lot of cosmetic customizations, whether it's new suits, new gear, anything like that. In this game, like, can you make Star-Lord look like a different version of himself, or
Absolutely.
you know, slap on a different customization for Groot?
Yes, actually, we have a variety of possibilities with costume that we're not going necessarily to go in details today. And I think in what you saw, like, it was hinting at some of these things towards the end, like the splash at the end. So already with what you saw today, it gives you a sense of those possibilities that are going to go through the history of Marvel and through the history of those characters in some ways.
And the Marvel universe is huge. Their space cosmic sector is huge. Are you sticking mostly to kind of known Guardians characters, or can we expect some interesting cameos or other, you know, characters to pop up?
Yes, it's a very big epic adventure, and you definitely can expect to see cameo or even some important roles by characters outside of the Guardians. What you saw today, there was some tease with Mantis being there, Cosmo has been teased, Lady Hellbender was introduced in comics like a few years ago, not so long, and now it's her first big role on screen. We definitely have a ton. Like, today, I don't want to spoil anything. I think it's the pleasure of discovering is important. But when we started the project, we were like, the first thing we went, it's to go into this fantastic, amazing series of comic books spawning from the 70s to today. So we had a lot to play with, and we really dove in those comics and immerse ourselves in them, and looking at what character would be interesting to bring, whether for a key role or a smaller role, or sometimes just a wink kind of thing. And we had a blast with that, and working in collaboration with Marvel to figure out like which ones are the best to use, or which one that we really want to use, and things like that. So yes, you can expect a lot of characters from the Marvel lore.
And along those same lines, what does the collaboration and the lines of communication with Marvel look like when you're working on a project such as this?
We meet every week. We talk every week. We show them progress on what we do. If it's not every week, it's every 2 or 3 weeks. For us, like when we met, and it connected because we were given the creative freedom we were hoping for, and them as the collaborators, they were there to make sure that what we were doing felt authentic, like it was a true Guardians of the Galaxy experience. It's not the comic books, it's not the MCU, it's our own version, our own thing, our own experience and our own identity. And Marvel, they've been great. They've been supportive. They were going with us. So it's funny, like when we started, the first time we started to design the characters, the 5 Guardians, and we go like, okay, well, we'll see how much leeway we have, and let's be creative the way we can be creative. Man, we turned it to 11, like the 5 Guardians, and it was the first time that Marvel was coming to Montreal. And I remember we had our creative bubble before the COVID, like when we used to work together, you know, like in the old world. And they land to Montreal, we greet them, and we bring them in our own bubble. And in the bubble and the way we work, like we have like the walls are plastered with sheets with all our intentions for the game, keywords like the experience, the locations, and things like that. And we run them through this. And now we have the pièce of résistance. We sit them on our couch in front of the TV, and we show our first version of the Guardians. And I see them like silent. For me, it felt like a minute. Maybe it was 20 seconds. Maybe I'm but I was like, oh, we're dying. They're going to kill us. They hate us and everything. And no, actually, like we pushed too far, but they were really excited with a lot of the ideas that we had in those versions of the character. And as we moved the dial back to have characters that are fresh, are new, but yet you recognize them. Like, if you know the Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't have to tell you those are the Guardians of the Galaxy. You see it right away. But at the same time, you never saw those versions of those characters. And that was the balance that we were looking for. And that was also the balance Marvel was looking for. And they helped us to get to that point. But that first meeting, like, it was quite, and I like to tell that story because it's like any collaboration. When you start, you don't know the other party, they don't know you, and we have to know each other, and what better to go at 11 at first.